Hello everybody, I'm Nobuo Haruna. I teach politics and international relations at Tokyo University of Foreign Studies. The first lecture is about the population problem that Japan is suffering from today. The title is A Demographic Portrayal of Post-War Japan. As you can see in this first slide, this is an article from the New York Times. It says that Japan is the grayest nation in the world. As the article goes on, close to 30% of the population is over 65, and the population has been shrinking since 2007. So you can see that Japan today is suffering from a shrinking and aging population. In this lecture, I will talk first about baby booms in the past, and then Japan reaching the stage of aging and a declining birth rate. Well, these keywords in Japanese are first, 高齢化, which means aging. The second one, 少子化, means the declining birth rate. And the third one is baby boom. Well, it's just a simple translation of baby boom from English. In this lecture, I will talk about how Japan arrived at this contemporary predicament. Well, so first of all, I'll talk about the problem that we see today. And secondly, I'll go into the past and talk about two baby booms in the past, in post-war Japanese history. And thirdly, well, this is mostly about the cause of the shrinking population and aging that we are facing today. We had two baby booms in the past, but we didn't have a third one recently. So I would like to start with the problem we are facing today, the shrinking and aging Japan. Well, I just mentioned, I just took an article from the New York Times suggesting that Japan is the grayest nation in the world. Well, this aging problem is still proceeding. And to pick up a very recent article from Japan Times, it says, for the first time, Japan's over 75s account for over 15% of the population. So the population of the aged people, the elderly people, is growing and growing year by year these days. And now you can see over 15% of the population is over 75. Well, the problem is not just about the population. The aging population, the shrinking population, the impact of this problem spreads to all over fields in the society, from economy, finance, social issues, public policy, and so on. So therefore, global institutions such as IMF, the International Monetary Fund, focuses on Japan as the leading exemplar of aging nations. Well, today's demographic structure, or in other words, the pyramid, the population pyramid of Japan, is the figure in the middle. You can see, we can't say this is a pyramid anymore because it doesn't look like a pyramid. It actually has two lumps in between, and it's like, well, it's not a pyramid. If you look at population projections of 2060, you can see that it's rather a pyramid upside down. But if you look into the past, look at the figure on the left side. This is the population pyramid of 1950 of Japan. You can see this is a clear shape of a pyramid. So you can see that Japan started with a pyramid, but this shape of this population structure transformed throughout the post-war ages, starting from around 1950 to date. So therefore, I would now like to go into the history and start from the first baby boom that took place right after the Second World War. So look at the demographic structure, the population pyramid of 1950. You can see that there is a huge lump, a large number of people at a very young age. So, well, to put it very simple, babies. So Japan experienced its first baby boom from 1947 to 1949. This is immediately after the Second World War, and a lot of young male soldiers came back from the battlefield. There were family reunions. Well, some created new families, but anyways, they all had a large number of children. And that's the cause of the first baby boom right after the Second World War. This is the late 1940s. Today, we are more than 70 years from then. Well, what we are seeing today is that these baby boomers have reached the age of retirement. And this is causing a lot of change in the society. The first baby boomers, in Japanese, they are called the Dankai generation. Dankai means a mass, a lump. So Dankai generation can be translated as mass generation. Because this has a huge population, this had a huge impact in the society, in the economy of Japan throughout the post-war era. So, as this governmental report says, well, the Dankai generation people, they shaped the trends in the Japanese economy because of the size of the population through consumption, savings, housing acquisition, employment, etc. So they had a great impact throughout the post-war era. But because they are now reaching the age of retirement, this will also cause a huge impact on Japanese economy and the society. Well, so to show this in a figure, you can see the population pyramid of Japan in 2020. Well, this is the shape we have today. We have two lumps. Well, you can see the largest lump of population is now in the elderly cohort in the early 70s, well, from the late 60s to the early 70s. But actually, you can see that there is a second large cohort somewhere around the mid-40s. So, well, I believe it's pretty natural that if there's one baby boom, then when the baby boomers reach the age of having children, say somewhere around the mid-20s, then there will be a large number of babies newly born around the same time. And that's the cause of the second baby boom. So you can see Japan had a second baby boom in the early 1970s. As I just mentioned, this is the time when the first baby boomers reached the age of their mid-20s. Well, they had children. They had a huge number of children. So this is the second baby boom. It took place from 1971 to 1974. To show you one interesting phenomenon because of the existence of the second baby boom. Well, if you look into the history of music in Japan, you can see the best-selling single ever in post-war Japan is not like dance music or rock music like BTS and so on. It's a song for children. Well, as this news article from the Japan Times says, well, the title of this song is Oyoge Taiyaki-kun, means swim, the baked fish called tai. Well, tai is a fish. Well, sometimes in English, I think this is called the red snapper. Well, anyways, it's a fish that is commonly eaten by Japanese people. Taiyaki is a snack that has the shape of this fish, tai, and so it's a baked snack. So it's a song about this snack of a fish-shaped snack, moving, swimming in the world, to put it very simply. And it was a song accompanying an animation on the children's TV program called Hirake Ponkiki. And this song was released in December 1975, and it was a great hit in the late 1970s. Well, I believe you know this reason. As I just mentioned, there was a second baby boom in the early 1970s. There were so many babies at that time when this song was released. So therefore, their parents bought these. At that time, there were no CDs. There were albums. bought the albums of this song. Okay, so we had 2 baby booms in the past. But as I just mentioned a little earlier, if there is 1 baby boom, it's very natural to have a second baby boom. But why not having a 3rd baby boom? Well, if there was a 3rd baby boom, that should have taken place in the early 20th century, because the second baby boomers, they were born somewhere around the early 1970s. In the early 2000s, they reached the age of 30. But if you look into the demographic pyramid of 2005, you can see there is no baby boom at that time. So, the biggest question we have here is, why didn't a 3rd baby boom take place in Japan in the 21st century? Well, one very simple explanation is that the birth rate has been declining steadily for a long period. You can, and especially in the early 21st century, you can see that the birth rate has declined to somewhere around the early, like 1.2. So it's mainly from 1.2 to 1.4. And well, the meaning of a birth rate is the number of children that one woman would have in her lifetime. And if the number is 2, that simply reproduces the population. But if it's below 2, it means that the population will definitely decrease. And the birth rate of Japan has been below 2 for a pretty long period, starting from the late 1970s. So therefore, and it has been going down and down and down steadily. So therefore, it is very understandable that there was no 3rd baby boom in the 21st century. But, well, if you look deeper into the situation, well, if you look into the statistics of married couples and others, you can see that for married couples, the birth rate is still not that low. Well, look at the chart right in front of you. On the right end, this is the birth rate of women in married couples. In 1977, the birth rate was 2.19, so it's over 2. Today, well, the newest one, the latest number, in 2015, the birth rate is 1.94. It surely has declined from 2.19, but still close to 2. It's not that low yet. So what we can see from this is that for married couples, they still have around 2 children in each family. So the problem we're facing today with regards to the decline of the population is the decline in marriage. As I just mentioned, when couples get married, they do have children. It's just that there is more and more people not getting married these days. Right in front of you, this is a chart showing the percentage of people not getting married, to put it very simply. Well, to be precise, this shows you the percentage of people with no experience of getting married at the age of 50. And well, if a person is not married at the age of 50, it is expected that that person will not get married throughout their lives. So therefore, the statistics is called the percentage of people never getting married. Well, you can see this percentage has been soaring. As for males, in 2010, this is a little old number, but it's over 20% in 2010, and it's still rising. So what we can say is that there are more and more people are not getting married, and in Japan, couples without being married, they do not have children in many cases. So therefore, this is probably the biggest cause of the decline of the birth rate and the shrinking population. It is not that the young people have no intention of getting married. they do intend to get married. This survey, as this survey shows, well, this is a questionnaire survey asking a lot of men and women about their intention to get married. Well, you can see in the past, like in the 1980s, over 90% of unmarried young men and women answered that they have the intention to get married in the future. This number has declined, surely declined. As for men, in 2015, the intention to marry someday has declined to 85.7%. But still, it's in the late 80s. And as for women, this declined to 89.3%, but this is nearly 90%. So we have to say that even today, men and women, young unmarried people, they have the intention to get married someday in the future. But something is obstructing this intention to marry in the future. And one big cause, one big obstruction is probably the employment problem. Because as this chart right in front of you shows you, there is a huge difference in the percentage of getting married between people with regular employment and people with non-regular employment. Right in front of you, this is the chart of men's marriage rate by employment status, employment type. I just mentioned regular employment and non-regular employment. I will talk about this in a later lecture. In the third lecture, I would deliver. So I won't go deeper into this, but to put it very simply, a regular employment is more stable than a non-regular employment. Well, so for men with regular employment status, you can see when they reach their early 30s, about 60% of them are already married at that time. But as for the male workers with non-regular employment status, that percentage is lower than 50% of the percentage of males with regular employment. So there's a huge difference because of the difference in employment status. Well, what happened in Japan since the 1990s? I'll talk about this in the second lecture, so I won't go deep into this either. But what happened in Japan since the 1990s is that the employment and opportunities shrunk, to put it very simply. You can see in the chart right in front of you, the unemployment rate rose. And at sometimes it was nearly about 5%. Well, comparing this with other states, other countries, I have to say that 5% is not that high, but it was pretty high in the post-war Japan. So the unemployment rate rose since the 1990s. And another important point is the jobs to applicants ratio. Well, it's the number of jobs available for each job seeker. And if this number is below 1, it means that it will be difficult for job seekers to get a job. You can see that this jobs to applicants ratio has been pretty low from the early 1990s until the early 2000s. So it became difficult to get jobs in the first place. And even if you were able to get a job, well, the employment status or the characteristics of employment has changed since the late 1990s. Well, the chart right in front of you shows how employment diversified since the late 1980s. In the late 1980s, you can see more than 80% of all employment was categorized as regular employment. But to put it very, very simply, regular employment, as I mentioned, it's stabler, and in many cases, there's no term of the employment. Or in other words, you can say that a person having a job with a regular employment contract can stay in that job as long as that person wants to stay there. That's the biggest difference between regular employment and non-regular employment. But from the late 1980s on, you can see that the percentage of non-regular employment, such as part-time working, Arbeiter, well, to put it very simply, that's temporary working, or dispatched working, contract employees. These types of non-regular employment has drastically increased since the late 1980s, and nowadays it counts about 40% of all employment in Japan. So, well, I'll go deeper into this problem later in my later lecture. But as for the population problem, I would like to end here, just mentioning that probably this diversification of employment, the difficulty of getting a regular employment status in the workforce has made it difficult for young people to get married, and probably this is one cause of the decline of the birth rate, decline of the population. Thank you very much. This is the end of the first lecture.